Our good buddy Robert Francis has another awful week after his proud declaration that he'd take your guns. We'll take a look at the effect that that has had on his campaign. And a prominent gun manufacturer decided that they will no longer produce guns in the civilian sporting rifle space. Kyrsten Sinema, Democrat senator from Arizona, is facing the cancel culture. And the Prime Minister of Canada wears blackface multiple times. We'll compare and contrast how that affects his re-election prospects in Canada, as opposed to how similar incidents have affected some well-known Americans. All that and more on the docket this week. I'm Big E, and this is the Liberty Cast. So it was a pretty busy news week this week. There is a lot that I want to talk about, a lot of which I'm not going to be able to get to. But there were a lot of interesting stories, stuff that I normally probably would not talk about, but a couple of things about them caught my eye. So I really want to get into them. But obviously, here at the Liberty Cast, our biggest concern is the Second Amendment and gun control. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So Robert Francis, our good friend Robert Francis, he, as we talked about last week, he had this grand declaration that, hell yes, he is going to take your AR-15, your AK-47, and the way most of these proposals, these gun confiscation, compensated confiscation proposals, however you want to label it, a lot of these proposals encompass a lot more than just the AR-15 and the AK-47. They pretty much make any sporting rifle in the 223 7.62 class illegal, and they want to come get them. But since his declaration, any chances he had, which he didn't have a chance, frankly, but any chances he did have just went down to zero, because he was polling, depending on what poll you look at, anywhere between he was polling anywhere between 4 and 8%, depending on which poll you looked at. Since then, since the debate when he made that declaration, he's polling at anywhere from 0 to 4% in those same polls. He's done. He's done. His gun control ideas, his confiscation ideas, are antithetical to most Americans. The left likes to trot out a lot of these statistics where 90% of Americans are in favor of universal background checks. But when you get into the details and the specifics of what universal background checks entail and how the questions were asked in these polls, that rate drops dramatically. In some cases, in half. And even though his ideas are, as I said, antithetical to most Americans' beliefs, he is mainstream in the leftist political class, without a doubt. The one difference is they don't talk about it.
The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
You do not talk about Fight Club. You do not talk about gun confiscation. Every one of the Democrats that are left on that stage are completely 100% behind gun confiscation. Make no mistake. Thankfully, Comrade de Blasio's not in that group anymore. We probably won't get to talk more about that, but yeah, he dropped out. Yay. So yeah, make no mistake, they want gun confiscation. They want us completely disarmed. If it wasn't for Heller, they wouldn't just be talking about taking our AR-15s and AK-47s. They would be talking about taking everything and giving it over to the government. And the only people who would be allowed to have guns in their utopia would be them, their bodyguards, and the police, and the military, obviously. course, there are some leftists that don't even want that, but that's a whole other story. And in addition to, obviously, the Heller decision not allowing for them to confiscate pistols, the Overton window hasn't really shifted enough in their favor. It's shifted a lot, believe me, but it hasn't shifted quite enough to make that feasible, which is why Robert Francis's support has dropped to statistically 0. Now, in case you're not familiar with the term Overton window, basically the Overton window refers to the spectrum of policies from one extreme to the other on a given issue, whether that's gun control, abortion, anything. And the Overton window illustrates that it is only a portion of this spectrum that is within the sphere of the politically achievable or socially acceptable at any given time. I mean, drag queen story time, anyone? I mean, can you imagine how far the Overton window would have had to shift from the 60s and 70s to now? I mean, it's ridiculous. And just consider back in the 60s and 70s, high school kids would drive to school with rifles in their trucks because they were going hunting after school. Try that now. It's an unacceptable taboo. So the Overton window has shifted, and it has shifted dramatically, but it hasn't shifted to the point where people are now in favor of gun confiscation. Not yet. And believe me, it's not for the left's lack of effort, because they're trying, and they're trying hard. Sandy Hook Promise, the group that was founded by a number of the parents of the children who were killed in the Sandy Hook massacre, they put out a PSA about back to school time.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
Now, as I said, the Sandy Hook Promise, the parents, the parents of the victims of that massacre, they have a pass to say whatever they want. This ad, however, not helpful. Now, I don't know if you caught the full effect of the audio, but as the kid was running and talking, you could hear people screaming and gunshots ringing out. They talk about conservatives and Second Amendment advocates fear-mongering. Well, if you watch that entire ad, it is pretty much the very definition of fear-mongering. I'll put a link to the video up on the website so you can see for yourself just how unhelpful it is, and how if you have children that would watch that would do nothing but put fear in their hearts. Anti-constitutionalists, gun grabbers, whatever you want to call them, anti-Second Amendment, they talk about wanting to have a conversation about gun control. But their conversations are always one-sided. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in a conversation anymore. I told you about some of the conversations I've had where I was told if it was my time, it was my time, and there was nothing I could do to stop that. So when you have conversations like that and ads, PSAs like this, talking about how we're conservatives, people who want to protect themselves and their families are fear-mongering, I'm not interested in a conversation anymore. I am not interested in a quote-unquote conversation until the laws that we currently have on the books are enforced, when we take advantage of every tool we have at our disposal. Mandatory sentencing, automatic death penalty for capital murder, involuntary civil commitments for people who have been adjudicated mentally ill and a threat to themselves or others. Due process. If we do all of that and it has no discernible impact on gun violence, maybe then I'll be willing to have a quote-unquote conversation. But until then, the left can just kill that noise right on through here because I'm not having it. I'm not interested. Now, continuing on the gun control debate, tangentially anyway, the gun manufacturer Colt has decided to halt production on AR-15s. Now, when this was announced, people on the left were ecstatic. They thought they had a huge win. Not so fast, my friends. Colt is not doing this because of some reaction to school shootings or a reaction to any of the mass shootings that have occurred this year. And they're not turning their back on the Second Amendment. This was a strictly financial decision. They believe that the civilian AR market is saturated and are going to concentrate on law enforcement and military contracts and government contracts. Now, I readily admit that my first reaction when I read the headline was that I got upset and that I thought that they were cowing to the leftist pressure to do their part, quote unquote, to ban guns. But after looking at their statement, after looking at the situation, not so much. In fact, let me just read to you a bit of the statement, the official statement that Colt put out. The market for modern sporting rifles has experienced significant excess manufacturing capacity. Given this level of manufacturing capacity, we believe there is adequate supply for modern sporting rifles for the foreseeable future. On the other hand, our warfighters and law enforcement personnel continue to demand Colt rifles, and we are fortunate enough to have been awarded significant military and law enforcement contracts. So there you go. Now, to be fair, Colt is not my go-to when it comes to AR-15s. People that I know and reviews that I've read on forums when I'm researching different rifles that I'd like to add to my collection, most of those people are not fans of Colt's civilian offering. So this is not the huge deal that the leftist, anti-constitution, anti-freedom, anti-gun media has been making it out to be. I mean, you have Palmetto State Armory, Daniel Defense, Wyndham Weaponry, Bravo Company Manufacturing that makes a really high-end yet still affordable AR platform, and people seem to really love them. It's probably the next AR that I plan on purchasing. And then you can build your own. If you have even just basic tools, you can get yourself, there's kits you can buy online. You can get yourself an 80% finish lower and mill it yourself and build your own. So Colt is not going to be missed in the civilian AR marketplace. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to shift gears here for a minute and talk about something that we don't normally talk about here on the Liberty Cast, and that is state politics, and not even Texas state politics. And we, especially during this political climate and the presidential election that is going on right now, this is an even more rare occurrence. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I'll fill you in on exactly what I'm talking about, and we'll examine what it means in the broader context of this presidential election and the political climate as a whole. We'll be right back. Now, as I said before the break, state politics, especially states that are not Texas, I don't spend a lot of time on. And frankly, I don't spend a lot of time on Texas state politics, except as it pertains to the Second Amendment and gun control. Come to think of it, though, I probably should, because so many people are fleeing states like California and Massachusetts and coming to Texas. Businesses and individuals alike coming to Texas and doing their best to turn this red state, this very important red state, blue, bringing all the ridiculous policies that they fled those states to get away from and bringing them here. It really makes zero sense. But then again, when has the left ever made sense? But that's something that Texas and the country as a whole simply can't afford. But I found this particular story very interesting. Last week in my show about 9/11, I talked about division. I talked about that in the video I did on 9/11 as well. And I talked about the extreme division that we're seeing in our political discourse. And when Kyrsten Sinema, the senator from Arizona, was running last year, I obviously wanted Martha McSally to beat her. Martha McSally was the Republican candidate. Kyrsten Sinema was the Democrat candidate, and she had a reputation for being a far left radical. And I just thought, I'm not a fan of McCain, the late Senator John McCain, but at the same time, he wasn't the far left radical that Kyrsten Sinema had the reputation for being. And the prospect of having a far left radical take the seat that John McCain had, who wasn't a conservative, but he wasn't a far left radical. Towards the end of his career, he kind of did veer towards that way, but I think a lot of that had to do with the illness that he was suffering from. So we'll just leave that there. But Kyrsten Sinema, like I said, had the reputation for being a far left radical. But since she's been in the Senate, she's voted with the president 81% of the time. Now, as a result of that, the leftists in the Senate want to censure her. And this is emblematic of the extreme polarization that we're seeing in this country. Now, despite her party's radical partisanship, and despite her reputation prior to taking the Senate seat, she has demonstrated a willingness, a rare willingness among her fellow Democrats to find common ground. And that is just an absolute no-no in the Democrat Party. Here's what it boils down to. The left thinks that conservatives, people on the right, are evil people with evil intentions, evil ideas. And when you think the people with whom you disagree are evil, common ground is impossible. Take, for example, abortion. Abortion is an evil act, and there really is no common ground. Because if you think that a woman should be able to just have unprotected sex and get an abortion when the results of that unprotected sex are known, then that's evil. And there's just no common ground that can be had between a conservative and a leftist. There's just none. But there are certain things that conservatives are willing to find common ground with leftists on. Well, I shouldn't say leftists. There are Democrats and liberals with whom conservatives can find common ground. Leftists are the people who believe in abortion on demand and people who believe in gun confiscation and disarming the entire population. Those people you really can't find common ground on. That said, conservatives still don't believe that they are evil. When it comes to abortion, the act is evil. And committing that act is evil. But I know people who have had abortions. I don't think they're evil people. I think they did a bad thing. But a leftist will tell you that because I said that I believe that the act of abortion is evil, that I'm evil. But I'm the one that wants to protect the unborn baby. And you're the one that wants to chop it up in little pieces or suck it out with a vacuum. But yet, I'm the evil one. Okay. Don't think there's going to be any common ground there. But circling back to Kyrsten Sinema, she has demonstrated a rare willingness to try and find common ground with conservatives or with Republicans. A lot of Republicans in Congress are not necessarily conservative, so there's that. But still, this is what Dan O'Neill, who is the state coordinator for Progressive Democrats of America, had to say about Kyrsten Sinema. Quote, "Here's the thing. We support Kyrsten Sinema. We want her to succeed. We want her to be the best senator in the country. But the way she's voting is really disappointing. We want Democrats to vote like Democrats and not Republicans. The Progressive Caucus is very concerned with Kyrsten Sinema's voting record. We love her as we love all Democrats, but we want her to vote like a Democrat rather than supporting Trump half the time." Isn't that what compromise is? Isn't that what people who want to get things done for the American people do? Is they try to find common ground. They try to compromise. If all you do is vote party line every single time on every single issue, when the Senate is this divided, you're not going to get anything done. Now, I seriously doubt that Kyrsten Sinema has changed to the point where where she's voting her conscience, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't believe that even voting 81% of the time with the president makes her a Republican or makes her a conservative. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe that she's changed her stances on abortion or any of the other far left radical things that she has espoused throughout her career. But credit where it's due, she's willing to compromise. She's willing to do what she has to do for the American people to get the job done. I give her credit for that, and I think it's really sad that her party is basically trying to write her up because she's not towing the party line. I just think that's ridiculous. Okay, we're going to move on because there's a few other things I want to get to, and we're running short on time. This week, the president announced sanctions on Iran for their alleged role in blowing up Saudi oil refineries. Is there evidence to support the allegation that Iran is responsible? Well, the Houthi rebels in Yemen are backed by Iran, and they claimed responsibility. I would say the chances are probably pretty good. I haven't delved into this. I haven't read every article. I haven't read every piece of analysis on it. So I'm not going to say definitively one way or another. And frankly, if all it was sanctions, I wouldn't care. Sanction them until they're completely crippled as an economy, as a government, as a country. I don't care. Well, I do care insofar as that I would love to see them crippled as a country, yes. But now the Pentagon has announced that they're sending troops to the Middle East. Their mission is supposed to be defensive in nature. They're sending troops and they're sending enhancements for the air and missile defense systems in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Now, it's not clear how many troops they're sending, but as far as I'm concerned, any is too many. The United States is now energy independent. We are a net exporter of energy. We don't need to protect the Saudis. Yes, there are allies, not that I understand why. I mean, they support radical Islam, although radical Islam is kind of redundant. But they support it. They're just better at covering their tracks than Iran. But they're a repressive regime with nothing in common with Western values, with American values. Nothing. It were at least the values that we used to have as a country. Remember the Overton window that I spoke about earlier? Think about what's acceptable now as opposed to what would have been acceptable 20, 30, 40, 60 years ago. We've come a long way, and in many cases, that's not a good thing. Now, I will say that The president has shown a remarkable capacity for listening to his advisors. He's espoused some stances on gun control and walked them back when he heard the hue and cry from his base. He's stood down from some overseas conflicts in the past, and hopefully, even though he has taken the step to send troops this time, hopefully he will be able to keep us out of another extended conflict or any conflict. Because like I said, I don't think we should be sending troops over there anyway. But since we are, I hope that it remains a defensive mission and not something where we end up in firefights with Iranians and Houthis and whoever. We don't need that right now. And if we do get into something like that, President Trump will not get reelected. I'm not going to say I guarantee it, but if that happens, I don't even want to say unless we get attacked somehow. I do not see any way that if we get into any kind of heated situation over there, that the president can win re-election. I just don't see it. And I know that there are conservatives with a lot more reach than I have, which is to say I don't have any at this point. But I know that there are a lot of conservatives that feel the same way. And like I said, he's shown a remarkable capacity to listen. So hopefully he'll listen again, and we won't be talking about in 6 months how many troops we've lost in this new conflict, because that will not be a good look and will most certainly doom any chances he has of winning re-election. All right, y'all, there's a few more topics I want to get to, but before we get to them, we're going to take another quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to those topics and get you out of here with some more stupidity. Stay tuned. So the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has been outed wearing blackface multiple times. Now, all things being equal, I don't care. It is of no consequence to me what Justin Trudeau, anything having to do with Canada, I do not care. I mean, it's Canada, for crying out loud. At least I wouldn't, and I wouldn't even be talking about it. But the left's
hypocrisy knows no bounds.
None. None whatsoever. Now, I don't think he's a racist. I don't think most people believe that Justin Trudeau is a racist. But most people in Canada and most people who have any idea who he is believe he's a hypocrite. But can you imagine if pictures were to surface of President Trump or Donald Trump Jr. or Charlie Kirk or Rick Perry or Tucker Carlson or anyone right of center were to have pictures like this surface? Can you imagine the outrage? It would be unbelievable. And the left would be calling for their job, calling for every possible bit of retribution they could possibly imagine. Don Lemon, who was unbelievably forgiving of Justin Trudeau, he would be out for blood for anyone else, for anyone who was not on his side of the aisle. I mean, the leftist media, the American media maggots, as my friend BZ likes to call them, couldn't even bring themselves to call it blackface. They said brown face. They said that he darkened his skin. They couldn't even bring themselves to call it what it was.
After a photo popped up of him wearing brown face during a school event in 2001 when he was a teacher, he said he didn't think it was racist at the time. Now he says he knows it was. He's apologizing for it. Also saying it, wasn't the first. He's done it before. What do you think, Anna?
Look, you and I have friends who have worn blackface. You and I, know people who did this in the past, and there is now a different standard than there was in the past. I think it was a pretty horrible thing to do, a pretty stupid thing to do. To me, that the entire idea of, putting on dark makeup seems like a really lazy attempt at costume. Surely you can be more creative than that. That being said, to hear the words, "I am sorry, I made a mistake," come out of a government leader's mouth is so refreshing, and it's so shocking that I'm shocked we all haven't gone into some sort of conniption because I have forgotten what it's like to have a leader that can express some level of remorse, regret, and humility to accept it and say it out loud.
I was stunned when I heard him. It was so refreshing to hear. Listen, I'm not talking about what he did, how egregious, whatever you think, you can think about that, but to hear a leader apologize and seem contrite, to have some level of contrition, it's such a, pun intended, foreign
What? Did that
thing
really
right
happen?
now.
Does that
Yeah.
actually happen?
But there's Don Lemon himself calling it brown face. And let me tell you something, Anna, I hate to break it to you, but y'all have been suffering from conniptions for a very, very long time. But let Donald Trump Jr. show up in a picture from 15 years ago in blackface. Oh my goodness. Katie bar the door. You want to see conniptions? Their heads would explode. And while their heads were exploding, they would be calling for blood. They would be calling for him to lose any job he had. They would use that to impeach the president. I mean, it would just be insane. And just in case you think I'm being hyperbolic because of the double standards that the left employs, in case you think I'm just making all this up, in case you think that I'm going crazy myself, listen to this.
But what is racist? Because truly, you do get in trouble if you are a white person who puts on blackface on Halloween, or a black person who puts on whiteface for Halloween. Like back when I was a kid, that was okay as long as you were dressing up as like a character. There was controversy on the Real Housewives. There was a controversy on the Real Housewives of New York with Luann, as she dressed as Diana Ross, and she made her skin look darker than it really is, and people said that was racist. And I don't know. I thought, like, who doesn't love Diana Ross? She wants to look like Diana Ross for one day. I don't know how that got racist on Halloween. It's not like she's walking around in general.
Megyn Kelly's career got blown up for that. She got fired. Meanwhile, you have guys like Governor Ralph Northam from Virginia, the guy who wouldn't shake my dad's hand during their campaign for lieutenant governor, and also has pictures of him wearing blackface or a KKK hood, or in blackface standing next to a guy in a KKK hood. He still hasn't been able to tell us which one of those extremely racist costumes he was wearing. So I'm pretty sure he's a racist. But he's still the governor. So there is a clear double standard. And what Megyn Kelly said, and when I first heard it, I was like, there's no possible way they're making her apologize for that. And she did so tearfully. And it's like, come on. I'm still baffled. I'm still mystified as to what was so controversial, what was so bad, what she said that was so egregious that she had to lose her job for that. Now, I am not saying by any stretch that I think Trudeau should resign. I'm not even saying that Ralph Northam should resign. But there's got to be there is a double standard, and there's got to be some sort of balance here, because somebody saying that it's okay for a white person to dress up as Diana Ross and darken her skin is somehow cause for her to lose millions of dollars. Yet Ralph Northam and Justin Trudeau, who dress in blackface or KKK hoods, it's all good. And it's all good because they're on the right side of the aisle, and by right I mean left. They're on the side of the aisle that the media is on, that the leftist media is on. It's maddening is what it is. Okay, this next story is not even really a story. It's not even newsworthy, but I found it absolutely hysterical. And it is Corey Lewandowski in his testimony on Capitol Hill the other day. And he's being questioned by another one of our good buddies, Eric Swalwell. And this is some stuff that's pieced together. It's not very long, but You'll understand why I wanted to share it when you hear it. Take a listen.
Are you ashamed of the words that you wrote down?
President Swalwell, I'm very happy of what I've written, but you're welcome to read it if you'd like.
Have you ever put any words that the president asked you to write down before in a safe? Or was this the first time you'd done that?
I believe it's my standard operating procedure when taking notes, Congressman.
So every note that you take of the president, you put in a safe? How big's that safe?
It's a big safe, Congressman. There's a lot of guns in there.
Oh, that was amazing. Corey Lewandowski absolutely owning Eric Swalwell. It was amazing. That was nothing really newsworthy, nothing worthy of commentary. I just thought it was absolutely hilarious. And there's about 7 minutes of it. Those are two of the biggest highlights that I found. But it was it was that oh, that was hilarious. And if you watch the video, the look on Swalwell's face is priceless. All right, folks, we've come to the part of the show that I know you have all been waiting for.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time!
So there was a lot to pick from this week, especially with the plethora of material we got from Corey Lewandowski's testimony. But when I heard this, I knew this was it. I knew this was it. And when you hear who it is and what they said, you'll agree.
Real man of genius.
Where the disenfranchisement of Puerto Ricans is rooted in the history, the colonial and imperialist history that we've had in policies of the United States. The issue of DC statehood is rooted in a different evil in our history, which is the history of slavery in the United States. On April 16th, 1862, through the Compensation Emancipation Act, it was the District of Columbia that was the first to free enslaved people in the United States of America. Right here on this hallowed land, the first. And DC here, this ground blazed a trail, a vision for equality and justice in the United States. And many people sought refuge from the tyranny of slavery right here in the District of Columbia. To deny the statehood of the District of Columbia is to deny the impact of slavery in America. It is a form of denial of our history. And in order for us to achieve the full-bore justice and democracy that we promise, we need to give people in the District of Columbia the right to vote.
Erroneous! Erroneous! Erroneous on both counts.
Oh, Lord.
No, Vince, when she is opening her trap, she is erroneous on every count. I mean, that clip was just over a minute and 20 seconds, something like that. And there was so much wrong in that. It's beyond, I don't even know how to describe it. But the actual clip from that hearing of her speaking is about 8 minutes long. And she is just, the woman has never read a history book. Never taken civics, never read the Constitution. She is just, me and a buddy of mine used to like to say Joker style. And if you've seen Batman, I think I might have talked about this before on the program, but if you've seen The Dark Knight, where Heath Ledger is playing the Joker, there's a scene where he turns to one of the other characters, I believe it was Two-Face, and he says, "Do I really look like a guy with a plan?" And whenever something would happen at work or whenever we would get lost or anything like that, it was Joker style and we would just wing it. And that's what AOC is doing right now. She is in Congress. When she was running, she probably had no thought, no inkling that she could possibly win. And now she's Joker styling it in Congress. And it's obvious that she is woefully out of her depth. And I'm gonna have to do a deeper dive into everything that she says in this hearing, because just like Vince said, she is erroneous on all counts. She's erroneous on every count every time she opens her mouth. And she is just showcasing the fact that she is a complete moron. She is the world heavyweight champion of stupid here at the Liberty Cast. And I don't see anyone on the horizon that is going to be able to take that crown from her. Well, folks, that's our show. There was a lot more I wanted to get to, but unfortunately, we're out of time. So thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. And you can find us on Spreaker, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, wherever you like to get your podcast content. You can find us there. If we're not on your favorite platform, let us know, and we'll do what we can to get added to it. You can also find us on the website. It's thelibertycast.net. Go to the podcast page. You can find all of the podcasts going back almost all the way to the beginning. And you'll find on each podcast links to a lot of the stories that I use, a lot of the stories that I mention, a lot of the sources that I use for checking facts and things like that. And sometimes just stories that I find interesting, whether or not I included them in the show. So I encourage you to take a look. You can also follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Parlay. It's at The Liberty Cast on all 4 platforms. So again, thank you all for listening. And until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.